Okay, people. So today I am joined by Jordan Charles, who is writer, director, producer. Jordan, is there anything you don't do? Like, thank you for stopping by, my man.
Hey, I appreciate it, Kevin. Thank you for the opportunity and thanks for everything you're doing on your platform here. It's wonderful.
And no worries at all, man. I'm glad you can stop by. And yeah, I see you got a poster behind you, which perfect because you got a short film out right now, Brothers in Arms, right?
Indeed. Absolutely.
Now, this is a project that you're hoping to develop into a film. That's right, right?
Yeah, we started off as a short. Well, initially, actually, Kevin, I started pitching it actually in industry circles. I would say probably about 3 years ago, and they indicated to me I had the feature film screenplay, and then a lot of people that I commend and highly admire in the industry, they told me, it might be a good idea for you to develop proof of concept to show the tonality, the themes, and
Mm.
then, I managed to gain the investment dollars for us to film the short film. We ended up with a 40-minute short film that you see here that the poster reflects. Um, and now we've submitted on the film festival circuit. We're now resubmitting it a lot throughout the industry to try to gain the actual underlying feature film to be developed, financed, and made. So it's been a journey for sure.
Right. That's interesting because, yeah, it's always curious about how these concepts come about, right? So the notion of, the short to the film. But so it was originally the idea was a feature.
Absolutely. The initial inception was always that. I've always been inspired by the long format feature filmmaking.
Mm.
I'm predominantly a Screen Actors Guild and Actors Equity actor, so I've acted a lot on the independent film landscape, and that's where my passions lie in the entire creative industry and the filmmaking industry. So the long format, I would love the next 25, 30 years to be devoted to that, with also obviously a little bit of television because there's so much great content coming out in that form as well. But this was always meant to be and intended as a feature film, probably in the 2 hour, 210 variety, something of that nature.
Right, right. Okay, so your initial idea is the film. And when you were pitching that, right? So what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's different for everyone, right? I mean, Hollywood is filled with wonderful ideas, and a lot of them eventually end up on some canvas, whether it be television, film, theatrically, sometimes on stage, whatever it might be. For me, because I've been so enamored with the feature film medium, I decided, okay, what films kind of enamor me to filmmaking? And it's two seminal films that a lot of our tonality and themes are based on. Michael Mann's Heat, Martin Scorsese's The Departed. These are films that make my heart dance. So
Mm.
this is the type of filmmaking that I would like to be associated with going forward. Just gritty, visceral cinema, even that might even touch on film noir tendencies, things like the Coen Brothers' No Country for Old Men. So I developed this story of two brothers that, due to a tragic childhood accident, they get separated and then they lead disparate lives. One becomes this groom for promotion, relentless police officer, and he grows up on the straight and narrow. The other one ends up leading a life of crime. His father, who's in jail, grabs him through his tentacles and network, and he grows up as this mastermind criminal. And the film picks up 25 years later, where these two boys are on a collision course to collide. And that's kind of the elevator pitch for the story tendencies that we're trying to tell in the greater feature length film. So when I was pitching it in industry circles about 3, 4 years ago, I was there's multiple concepts with this film. The story itself is what I just told you, but I've also been very much inspired by people like Ben Affleck and Matt Damon or Sylvester Stallone, where they were able to herald their writing as filmmakers to use it to advance their acting in the industry. And
Mm.
I'm trying to do the same thing with this project. So we went in industry circle to pitch it. I told a lot of the film financing, development executives, and so on and so forth that I'm trying to do the same thing as these other actors that I so admire with this feature film concept. And they indicated to me, the best thing you can do is somewhat what a lot of others have done before you, where try to create a proof of concept, try to engender the project to very good cast to surround yourself with. And then from there, you can project the project into its ultimate light and then use that future proof of concept to eventually get the feature film developed. So now that we're at this concept being completed at 40 minutes, we're now starting to proliferate the exhibition, the distribution of it, to now rally around industry circles to finally get this final push where the feature film goes into development. It's been an odyssey, Kevin, I can tell you. It's a lot of steps.
I can imagine, man. I can definitely imagine. Like, what was the initial um feedback on the script itself? So were people gravitating to the story that you'd written?
Yeah, it's humbly speaking, the reviews of those that have read the script to date have been very, very strong. William Monahan is a writer. I spoke with him like a year ago, actually, because his writing on The Departed, even though that was based on another project, but he did such a great job to
Mm,
adapt that film, right, and that story. And there's a lot of underpinnings in this story that are semblant of that type of writing. Again, like visceral cinema, where there's a lot of broken family and the shards of that and the redeeming qualities and the challenges that are inherent in that. So when I initially submitted to industry circles, we invited one agent. He indicated he felt it was like one of the top 12 scripts he's read in the industry in probably 30 years. And I thought, okay, I hope that's not hyperbole, or maybe there was other reasons for him to want to sign us and things like that. But that made me happy. But at the same time, I mean, you don't rest on laurels like that. That it's just part and parcel of the process, right?
mm.
The underlying material is good. You always have to start off with a sound script. I hope that we've arrived somewhere at a modicum of, a standard where people will look at it, read it, consider it, where they think, you know what, when it actually maintains its visual presence, it will capture audiences, or people will come away with feeling something from it. That's really the ultimate goal. So I think the feedback's been good so far, but it's just, again, another stage in the process. There's so much work to go.
Right, right. Now, when you're talking about this project, right, and you're using, films like The Departed, Heat, things like that as your kind of examples of, is there a worry that people will, because those are great films, right? Those have, won awards, acclaim, just they've stood the test of time, right? So holding your project up to that window that people may misjudge it, right? Because they're looking at these seminal features, and then you've got this new guy coming. It's just like, yo, who the fuck is this, right? Trying to say he's like these motherfuckers, right? And so I think sometimes people, because you can have a great thing, but because they're judging it against these other great things, they're now downgrading yours, right? So, was there a fear of something like that, or just looking, or having people think, he's trying to do this, right? Is he trying to regurgitate these stories?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of things, I would have to go back probably, I've probably written and rewritten this script probably close to 40 times, right? I mean, the work's never done. It's just when you decide
Mm,
to kind of shut the computer down or put down the pen, right?
yeah.
But, it's interesting, Kevin. Fear or anxiety or restlessness when it comes to, like, how is your work going to be perceived, how are you going to be perceived as an artist? And like you said, like, if you set lofty standards like that, where your project is representative of seminal films that came before it, I think, I guess our approach is, you want every project to stand on its own merits, right? So that's great that you've got tonal representative works that you're referencing, but at the same time, each project, it's got its own emotions, it's got its own touch points, touchstones that you want the audience to resonate with. The pressure, I think, of that, I don't think I've allowed it to kind of have to allow myself to pivot, because here's the way I see it. A lot of people want to be associated with that type of filmmaking. Like
Mm.
the films that, you can pop in every year and just watch them over and over. You already know what's going to happen, but because they touch you on such a deep, visceral level, if you can participate in cinema like that, I think that's what we're all here to do. So I think, and I don't mean that as any means of disrespect to filmmakers that have got clout of that stature, that have been making films for 20, 30, 40 years. That's hero time for me. I mean, I put people like that up on such a pedestal, because to execute at that level, to make you feel that way, I think the average viewer doesn't understand how much work goes into that. Uh, Even if we can arrive at a quarter of that type of execution, I would be more than fulfilled. Um, I think you aim high and then you end up somewhere in that kind of stratosphere, at least you'd hope.
Well, I mean, listen, if you weren't aiming high, I'd be like, yo, Jordan, man, what's going on? You know what I mean? Because it's just like I even like those films that flop. No
Right.
one's going in trying to make a flop, right? No one's trying to make something that's terrible. It's just sometimes things catch fire, sometimes things resonate, right? I remember John Carter.
Oh,
I
right.
enjoyed the hell out of
So
John
did I.
Carter,
So did
but
I.
it didn't do it. Now, I say partly because the marketing was trash. Like I I hate trailers, man, because I think sometimes trailers give away the film. You
Yes.
know what I mean? Like, did you watch? It's a tangent, man. I do it
Yes.
sometimes, but we'll get back to where we're getting. But did you ever watch that Jordan Peele film? The
Get it.
one with the opposite people.
Oh, yeah. That's what they had, the scissors and the marketing.
Yes. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Uh,
can't remember what the hell it was called.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. Yeah. No disrespect to Jordan Peele. He's fantastic.
Oh man, it's a great film.
Oh, it's so good. But I think I know what you're saying. The trailer, you found that it was too revelatory, right?
Well, I didn't watch the trailer. I avoid trailers for the most part. And but once I reviewed it, so I'm trying to compile all the information for the website. So I pulled a trailer, and as I'm pulling the trailer, it starts to play, and they show a bit where the girl's looking at the mirror, and I'm like, that's too close, man. You're pointing people in the right direction. And for
Sure.
me, when I was watching it, because I had no clue, I'm like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? I was just like, yo, what is this? And it's great, right? Having that feeling where you're just completely caught off guard, you're blown away, right? That's incredible. Because I
It-
remember, like, it all stemmed because, back in the day, right? So, The Matrix and Gladiator,
oh, wow.
I
Yeah.
had I had no clue what the Matrix was. A friend called me up one day. It's like, "You want to go to cinema?" I'm just like, "Yeah, I've got nothing to. I don't know what's out though." He's like, "Oh, there's a film called The Matrix." I'm like, "Yeah, all right, whatever. I've got nothing better to do." So sitting there, and it just opens up. I'm like, "What the fuck is this? This is so great!" But I had
Amazing.
no clue going in. Right? I had no clue about Gladiator. I'd heard about Gladiator a year or so before, but I'd forgotten. And then you walk in and you've got that big battle in Germany starting off with the arrows. And I think that's such a great experience, you know? But I think
Absolutely.
trailers give away so much. So it's just like, I forget what my original point is, Jordan. But yeah, trailers, man, they're irritating. But John Carter, yes, John Carter. It No one knew what it was because the trailers all over the place. So I think people were like, "Oh, is this fantasy? Is this sci-fi? Is this a drama? what is this? But I think if you had pushed it in the right direction, people would have seen that because it's a good film. It was a lot of fun, and I think that is the problem a lot of time, right? Because you make something and you don't know what it's going to do. It can flop, it can succeed. So people will write things, they'll make a project and they'll hope it's good. But sometimes it's just not. But I think as long as you're making something that you feel proud of, that you put everything you've got into it. There's no half measures. You know what I mean? You're not like, let's just go home early today. It's just like, no, no, no. Let's get this scene right. If you've done that, it's all golden, man. Like, fuck what anyone else says. You know what I mean? Because
You're
people
making,
will always try and pull you down.
yeah, you're making great points. You know, the Wachowski siblings, that's such a that's a landmark film. I mean, you and I, it seems like I think we like a lot of the similar titles, similar filmmaking, the movies you're referencing. Like Gladiator, I mean, Ridley Scott is probably the director that I admire the most because very few are making cinema. I mean, I think he shoots with like 8, 9 cameras at once. He always comes under budget at like such a significant um, production structure that, I mean, he can make probably whatever he'd like because
Mm,
return on box office, but the way that he makes it, I think that's 40 years of experience or whatever it is, probably even more, that allows him to shoot like that. His films are incredible, and he attached himself to great writers. But to your point on the trailers, you're right. I think actually teasers are probably more effective because
mm,
you're right. When you walk into a cinema knowing very little about a project, and then you just almost get, it's so abrupt the way that you can get stunned by it and moved and affected. You know, it's so it's ironic actually. When you're making a film, you're developing it, you're thinking, okay, this resonates with me, but I also want other people to feel something from it. Then you're shooting it. You get a high in the shooting phase. Like I always say when I'm on set as an actor, I mean, you come prepared to set, you got your lines. I sometimes you giggle because it's almost like you almost feel like you're getting away with something because you're working from a place of imagination and creativity. You don't know what's going to happen in the moment. You don't telegraph performance. At least that's the training that I've had. And then a lot of happy accidents happen, surprises. And if you're leading with that all the way through the process, once the film is done in editing, sometimes you find the film in editing as well. It's almost like there's a movie that you write, as they say, there's a movie that's shot, and there's a movie that's edited, and there's like 3 films in there.
mm,
Probably even more actually when you think about it. When the viewer sees it, if they come in without any common or cardinal knowledge of what the content is going to be, I actually think that that's a welcome feeling. And it's so rare these days, right? Because we're so dominated by marketing and visibility and exposure of everything because we've got to compete with all kinds of things between branding and content, other films. It's so difficult. It's a lot of noise, right? So I tend to agree with what you're saying, Kevin.
mm. Yeah. I think that Jordan Peele, I think it just came you. I think it was called You.
Was it you? Yeah, I think
I
yeah,
think
that's
it's called
yeah.
You. I think it was called You.
Great job, great job.
Now, I think studios and people get scared, right? Because they think we just spent all of this money on something. So we need people to know. We need them to know there's these funny bits in it, and oh, there's this twist in it, and there's this. So you want to come see it. So I think they give out so much information when it's just like, yo, you just give someone the kernel of the idea, right?
Yeah.
It's like, because I don't know about you, Jordan, right? But with this whole strike situation and people pulling films off the schedule because they're like, the stars aren't there to promote it. I'm
Mhm.
just like, you could still put those films out because if a story is good, people are going to come see it regardless of if it's got big name actors, actresses in it, right? It's just like the story needs to be good. So you give people that that itch, you give them that little idea, that indicator of what they could be in store for, people will come, right? People will come.
Yeah, you would think. I think in most cases, I think you're right. But there are a couple. I would say a couple things on this though that I also think while you're saying that. I mean, there's films on like everyone's got a favorite list or whatever, right? So Gladiator, Matrix, those are definitely on my list. By the way, great choices. But I think even look at Shawshank Redemption. That's probably one of the better written films and better executed films in terms of emoting feeling in
Oh, it's tremendous.
audience of the spectrum. It's great, right? So when it came out, its box office, I think, is dwarfed compared to its success on home DVD, TBS, TNT when it got syndicated, and then streaming platforms. It became more popular. Not it didn't start as a cult following because it was a mainstream release, but you gained popularity for a film that was so strong and well executed after its theatrical run. Or look at, I mean,
Mm.
Heat, long running time, one of my favorite films ever. It's so great. Michael Mann is so talented. That film, I don't think it didn't win any Academy Awards. And it's strange because some people, I don't know if they avoid the theaters, they don't go to the theaters, they miss it. It's the time of year that it comes out. Sometimes it takes a long time in a film's exhibition gestation for it to gain success later on down the road. So it's weird too. Hollywood, in my opinion, is not a meritocracy. Everyone is working so hard to make films of stature and they want to share their work and give it away to an audience. But sometimes a film doesn't find an audience or it doesn't find it early enough. And it takes a long time for the return on investment to happen on the production company or studio side. And it's sometimes hard for the filmmaker to get heralded with immediacy because it takes time for people to recognize it or find it or word of mouth to travel. It's very, very strange, right?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I think something that's hurt it is cinema right now. Because remember back in the day, right? Everyone would be like, cinema is the cheap date, right? Or it's the cheap thing to do with your friends. I remember as I was growing up, for £5, right, I could get the train to the cinema. I could get a cinema ticket, go across the street, buy a bag of like penny sweets and a panda pop, right? And I still have some change, right? For
Right.
£5. Now it's like you're dropping £30 just for the cinema. That's without travel, that's without food, without if you want snacks or anything. So the price of going to the cinema has gone up so much, right? The cost of like I used to work in a cinema. I was at uni, right? And a bag of like M&Ms, which is here, let's just say they were 80p. In
Mhm.
the cinema, they I think they were like 250.
Oh
So it's
man.
over 100% markup on the price. And it's things like that that hurt the cinema, right? And so if people are just like, I can't afford to go to the cinema, right? So then they wait. Right. And so then no one's going to the cinema. So the box office is coming down and then things are getting hailed as a flop. And then it's just like, oh, we can't make these type of films and we can't do this. And it's all this weird thing. I think people need to, like, the ecosystem is broken in a way. And more partnerships need to be made to enable people to enjoy what's being produced, you
Yeah,
know?
you're making very, very provocative points. You know, I remember it's funny. In my mind, my mom used to tell me that my parents were immigrants from Italy after World War II, right? So they ended up emigrating to Canada. My mom said there was like one cinema in the town that we grew up in, London, Ontario, Canada, which is kind of in between Toronto and Detroit. And she would tell me, you go downtown to the cinema, it's got all the flashy lights, and she goes, it would cost like a quarter to go like to the sit and then you would scrounge your change to be able to like I can't wait to go with my sisters or my friends and go to
Mm,
the cinema or like the latest Elvis Presley album that comes out and you just want to spend a few dimes, you want to buy that and then listen to it in your garage or something. we're so far removed from that now. I mean, when you look at how much the world has changed in just like half a century, it's incredible. And what you were saying before too, I kind of agree with you, Kevin. Like distribution is like a complicated jungle. Like if you look at distribution companies, the studios themselves, and how much money they put in promotion and marketing and distribution, then you have foreign sales agents and how to get films proliferated across global markets. And now the increasing importance of like global box office to a film's ultimate success, quote unquote,
Mm.
and its metrics. Like, people say it's a pendulum. It'll kind of swing this way. Now it's too much. Then it kind of shifts back and you find some sort of a mean. I don't know where we're going. Like, it used to be such an event. And I don't think I like Christopher Nolan and Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese and a lot of the leaders in our industry and how they herald the fact that there's no other experience when you're watching a film like the visual canvas in an auditorium with strangers and you're all realizing it in real time. And then you're experiencing that and everyone is emoting. There's something very sacred about that. It's just that when it becomes cost prohibitive, like you said, I think everyone needs to revisit, like, is this the way forward? Because if you think about it, look at what you just said. You spend $15 on a Netflix subscription, and that's great. You get access to a whole library of films. You pay that for 1 month, or you can spend $30 to go watch something on IMAX. And
Hmm.
I can see one film for 30, which is double the cost of having a whole library for 30 days. I don't know what the answer to that is. It's just, it makes it increasingly harder to find the patchwork of making a project successful.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. And like people moan about day and date release, which I don't really think is a problem. Right? I don't think it's a problem because in an ideal world, people want to go to the cinema. Right? Because it's that experience. I remember going to oh god, I think it was Endgame, not Infinity Wars. But there was a bit when then just all the heroes like come together to go get Thanos, and
Sure.
everyone just like yeah, and this just like that bit in Civil War when Spider-Man turns up, everyone's like, what? And you just hear that roar in the
Yeah.
place, or like just a film where it's that hilarious moment and just everyone is laughing and you might turn to the person next to you and you're just both grinning being like that was right. It's those things why people go to the cinema, right? When you leave the screen and everyone's like, oh my god, what was your favorite when that happened? When I remember coming out of Karate Kid 3 as a little kid, and
Yeah.
everyone's just like, yeah, I want to learn, mom, can I go learn karate? And
Yeah.
I'm feeling smug because I was doing judo at the time. I'm like, you know what I mean? I can already do that shit. Well, I can't, but in my head I could, right? But it's those things like coming out of Black Panther and just every kid, black, white, Chinese, Indian, it didn't matter, but they were throwing up the arms, Wakanda forever, right? It was just those joyous moments, right? That's why we go to the cinema, man. And I think you always want that. You always want to grasp that. So I think whether you go every week, every month, or even, you know, a few times a year, you still look forward to those occasions. So I don't think cinema will die, even though you hear that rhetoric, cinema's dying, I don't think cinema will die. You can price it out, right? But it won't die.
It's so true. It's fun, Kevin. Other moments that came to my mind when he said that, you almost got me excited. So I remember I saw Sixth Sense, M. Night Shyamalan, and I don't want to give it away for anyone that listens that hasn't seen Sixth Sense. You should see Sixth Sense, by the way. It's first time you see it, you can never recreate that feeling, but the collective gasp at like the reveal or Usual Suspects. Oh
Oh
my
my
gosh.
god.
The first, like at the end, like when you see like that just stays with you. Or
Mm.
I remember Matrix Reloaded or Revolutions, that whole highway segment when Neo comes in and he's like flying like a rocket, and he grabs Trinity and does that twist and circle.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
I like the collective gasp in the audience. How can you recreate that outside that environment? You can't. Like
Mm.
that make that heart beating stuff. Like that's akin to like being on a roller coaster, like some gravity machine or skydiving. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be about, right? Like, I mean,
Oh man, yeah.
great stuff.
Yeah. And you can have the best home setup, right?
Yeah.
But there is something about being in a custom built auditorium where the sound is phenomenal, the speakers are huge, right? And you just get hit by this wash of sound excellence, right? Have you seen The Harder They Fall?
I don't think I've seen that.
Yo, Jordan, you need to go watch Harder They Fall.
I'm
It
writing
is,
it down. I'm straight up.
it's phenomenal. It's on Netflix, right? James Samuels, I think you pronounce it James. It's his feature directorial debut. He's got a new film coming called Book of Clarence, 12th of January, people. Mark it in the calendar, right? Now, there's a spot in London called the Royal Festival Hall. It is phenomenal, right? I've seen so much music there, classical, rap, so many different genres, but it's such a great venue. You know
Nice.
what I mean? And for the London Film Festival this year, they had it. They were doing screenings in the Royal Festival Hall for the first time, and the harder they fall opened up the festival. And there's a bit in it, right? It's this Western, and there's this bit in it, and the guy's got the rifle and he's hitting it on the ground, right? And as the butt of the rifle's hitting the ground, then you get the boom,
Yeah.
boom, and the bass, and the way he's integrated the music into the scene. Oh
Amazing, huh?
my god, it's incredible. It's incredible. And he's done similar stuff with the Book of Clarence, which is just so good. Just it's the marriage of music and action and cinematography. It's when you see something come together in a way like this, you understand what film is, right? And I think it's those occasions why you just keep on coming back over and over again because you know what I mean? It's like you hear people talk about shit like heroin, right? You're chasing that dragon. You want to get that high again. And when you've seen a great film, you just feel like, I want to see another one. I want to see another one. I want to see another one. And you're just chasing it.
That's so great. Yeah. I recommend to listeners or viewers, avoid heroin, watch movies. I think that's gonna be better.
Yeah. Obviously, people. That's
That's
the
that's right,
message,
that's right,
right?
yeah. Yeah. But,
It's a lot
like
cheaper for you as well.
that's exactly, yeah. But, you're right, though, like, it's funny, we think of, okay, something's projecting on a screen, but if you look at all the components that have to come together to be able to create what you're watching, and but then how what you're watching with all its elements kind of imbues or infuses what you feel from it. Like, the importance of music or music composition in the visual frame, like, just sometimes the violins or the pianos, or you've got the symphony going off, like, it's all your senses being targeted by that. And again, if you get the benefit or the fortune of the big format with the screen, and again, other people are seeing it. I mean, sometimes, how many times have you been in a cinema where you look to the person beside you, you don't even know them, and then like a tear's coming down their cheek, and you're like, wow, I'm actually getting choked up. So this, I'm not the only person that's feeling this. And then other people are like, they stand up out of their seats and shout like, it is an amazing medium. It
Mm.
is there's nothing like it. I love, Kevin, your passion for film. Like, even this, what you're doing here, just even in your dialogue and discussions with different filmmakers, you're actually having a role in nurturing film, like, and its continuation and its importance. So I'm really glad that you do this because your passion is off the charts. It's very, very discernible.
I mean, I don't know, man. It's just one of those. I love storytelling. You
Yeah,
know, I in just all its different forms, and when you can connect with a story in a certain way, there's just a magic to that.
that's right.
Right? It's just like when you think back to being a kid and some of the great films that you watch. Like I remember watching I think it was 1977, right? The Lord of the Rings cartoon.
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah, I remember
And
that.
and they used that, I think it was called rotoscoping,
Yeah,
where
rotoscope.
they kind of animate, they kind of traced the film and made it the cartoon, and it was this weird, crazy effect, and like, man, so we just had the video of it, like, as a kid growing up, so we got this video, and it was creepy, but it was so good, and you just remember these different ways of trying to tell stories, right? And just all of these different things just stick with you, and it's just fascinating, right? And it's like leaving the screen, you always have these questions, be like, oh, I wonder why they did that, or man, that was a great thing, how did they come up with that idea? So it was just like having this opportunity to talk to people, right? And have those discussions and find out, right? Like, what was the idea? What was the concept? Where did that come from? Like, how did someone think of that visual style, right? How did you create this story? It's just such a joy to have these kind of conversations, right? And talk to people about their passions and, and speaking to people like yourself who are just early in the game, as it were. You know what I mean? I know you're not technically early in game. You've been doing this thing from, you know what I mean, 2009. I mean, that's your first acting.
Sure.
But it's just like, but even the time, but that's the crazy thing, right? 2009 is the first film you were in,
Mhm.
but all the years to get to that point, right? It's a long journey. So being able to talk to people about, yo, how did your journey start? Like, where did this come from? Like, where's this passion? Right? It's so interesting. It's so interesting. It's such a pleasure.
You know, no, I appreciate you for recognizing that and I guess having that feeling come out of you like that. You know, it is magical and wonderful though. It does tap into something that's very deep within us. You're right too. I think we're addicted to storytelling. I think like there's something tribal about us. Like even we're going way, way back, I'm sure I can almost picture it like people are on a campfire, who knows, like Neanderthals or early man or woman, like they're dialoguing somehow, even making sounds or painting or doing
Mm,
something like it taps into something that is close to our identity or something. I don't know what that is. It's the way we're made, I think, Kevin, you know? But
yeah.
it's one of the more beautiful things, I think, that something can reach you at that kind of authentic level. And I don't know, songs can do that. You know, they kind of give you a sense of place and time where I was in my life when this came
Mm.
out. And movies, I think, are like that as well. Good books are like that too. But it's
Oh,
always aspects like works of creativity that can do that, you know?
yeah, yeah. And when you think about those early cave paintings, right? Hieroglyphic.
Hieroglyphics. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Jordan.
Let's
I was
go.
just trying to bring you into the conversation. You know what I mean? I pretend I'm fluffing a word. You know what I mean? But there's like still paintings which are great. They can invoke so much. But
Mhm.
those early things, it's always a story,
Yeah.
right? They're always telling something, whether it's a story about a battle or telling people, it's relaying information, right? So those early things that we've seen, they're stories, early stories, You know, the way people like look at the stars and be like, oh, that's, I don't know what the stars are, but there's always a thing, right? A constellation is a thing, but there's a story behind it.
Sure.
Right. And so I think, as you said, we've always had that, right? We've always had this affinity and love for stories. And so it's just finding those new ways to tell them and to connect with people, to get them engrossed in this stuff. Like
It's amazing.
that's so crazy. Like for you, what do you think? Because you said like Heat and Departed were two great films that you love, but what do you think was maybe the genesis for this that kind of started you down this road? Can you think of anything which you saw and you were just like, man, I'd love to do that?
You know, yeah, it's so interesting. Like you get wrapped up in projects and gigs and work and things, and then you go back and you're like, I don't know, you think of the origin, like what prompted you on that path, right? And I think every project is different. I think every artist is different. I think for me, Kevin, there's a couple things here. Obviously, you see influential things and then you kind of tap into like what made me be moved by that so much. And then the type of cinema you might like might be different than the guy down the street or the woman at a different workplace. Like it's all different, right? And it's
Hmm.
all capturing us on different levels. Part of the gestation of like this project or projects like, I mean, I've written now 4 feature-length screenplays that we're going to get traction on even after we promote this and ideally get this thing fully developed and financed and get it moving. But I've got things that I have to get out of me. Like it's interesting. So my parents, it's probably the best way I can explain it. My parents were immigrants, okay? And I mean, there's so many people that have got, immigrant lineage in their family heritage, right? It's not an uncommon story, but I remember like they leave Italy and their countries are ravaged. I mean, bombs have destroyed everything. My grandfather was like out of the hurt locker. Like he had a bomb disposal unit. People in his unit died. He's one of the few that survived. My other grandfather became a prisoner of war. So he ended up in Argentina. He didn't go back to his family. The grandfather that did like the hurt locker bomb disposal work, he ended up going to Brazil, South America. Like, where am I going to posit my family now that
Hmm.
Europe is devastated? So they end up in Canada, and I see my dad, like, as a child, your parents are so significant, right? When you're growing up, like they're your heroes. Like you model yourself after them. You repeat things that they do, like your motor learning, all these things. And then I see my dad, like he's clamoring for a father that he didn't grow up amongst, right? Because his dad ended up staying in Argentina, and I had to express this, like get it out of me, like distanced family, separated family. And like, what does that hold for people that go through these experiences? So I tapped into my creative spirit, trying to focus on that. And I kind of created a story with these 2 brothers, like I mentioned earlier, that have to go through that feeling and the challenges in that. But also, it's, as a working actor, you keep knocking on doors, right? Kind of like how you said in the beginning, like I started an independent film in 2009. I mean, I was stage acting since I was like a little boy. My grandfather, the one that disposed bombs, he became the president of an Italian social club in Canada. And they would do plays around the holidays. And then he would have like his daughters act, including my mom, and they'd be on stage. And they would always cast me as like the baby Jesus and, these small stage productions and all these things. And then I was always the token little boy in like the stage plays. And then acting and performing were part of my life from a very young age. And then I did a little bit as a teenager and kind of left it. And I went back eventually after 2007, 8, 9. I always kind of had that part of me, but you're doing it and there's a lot of knocking on doors to get opportunities. You go on auditions and then sometimes you get roles, sometimes you don't. And then it's, right back to the beginning of the circuit again. Then you keep knocking and you audition and prepare and go to acting class and school. I started realizing I'm like, there are stories that I'm contributing to as an actor. And some of them are a lot of stories that I want to tell, but there's other stories that I also want to originate that I identify with on a more potent level.
Mm.
I took that idea of like, let's try to do it from a multi-hyphenate standpoint where you can imbue more of yourself in the creative process to be able to express yourself both with the written word, the performing, and then the actual physical film production. And I mean, it's hard to do one, two, or three. Like many people have done this prior, and it's a very, very strong challenge, right? But if you want to make sure that the final result is expressed in the way that you want it expressed, there is no other way to do it. Like you've got to invite collaboration, other ideas that are going to elevate the material. But I think that's really what the impetus was, in addition to looking at seminal films and saying, why did that translate a certain way for me? And that, of course, imbues your writing and the storytelling that you want to be associated with, right? That's the best way I can explain it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because you see it in so many different fields, like in comic books, right, where you have the artists and writers working at, Marvel, DC, other big publishing houses, and then thinking, I love these stories, but I don't own any of these. Right?
Right.
I'm not able to take the story in the direction that I might want to take it because, this publishing house, they've got this idea to do this thing next year. So I have to do this to my story. So they're like, let's create our own. Let's make our own stuff. Right. Then I can take it where I want to take it. Right. So I think, yeah, it makes sense to want to get behind the camera, to, put pen to paper, to do all of that stuff. So then you have that vehicle that you've been able to craft how you want it to be crafted, right? Where the characters do the things where you're like, because yeah, when you're acting in something and like, oh, we want you to do this, and you might think, I don't know if he would do that. But
Mm-hmm.
that's the job. That's the job you're given. So you're like, all right, that's what I'm going to do. But then you can, do your own and you can have the character do something completely different. Do the thing where you wanted that character to do. Go on that journey you wanted them to go on.
That's a great point, Kev. But and Kevin, I don't want listeners or viewers also to get the wrong idea as well. It starts off as a solo journey, right? Because you've got an idea, you want to translate it, and then you get it out of yourself and you express it, and then you're like, okay, there's something here, and it's never quite finished, and it can always be refined. But filmmaking, in my opinion, no matter what guys you're participating in, whether you're a writer, editor, you're a gaffer on set, you're a production designer, you're a script supervisor, filmmaking is all an invitation for collaboration. I mean,
Mm,
you cannot do it yourself. It's an exercise in humility. Like everything's going to go wrong. It's an act of constant problem solving. Like what you grow through what you go through. Let's go with that. Like it is a journey of 10,000 steps, and things are going to go wrong, and things don't go the way you think, and you rely on your partners. Sometimes you got to pick them up and they pick you up, and to participate to that degree with something that's so emotional, to me it is such a privilege and an honor that I have not found in anything else. I can't even describe to you, like, even when what you were saying before, like, it's amazing how people work so hard in a film and for whatever reason it doesn't translate properly, it doesn't make money, it doesn't get a return on investment, viewers don't get something out of it, and they're like, why is that a flop? Like, I got something out of it. If people understood how much work goes into films that even are considered flops, or they don't have execution success or monetary success, someone has devoted their heart and soul to that for 5 to 7 years, if not more. Like, that's why I'm not too critical of films that don't resonate with me. Like, after it's done, I'm like, all right, like, good job, he or she that worked on that, and I hope the next one goes even better for you. But I don't think the average viewer realizes the work that has to be devoted to even things that don't gain the success. Like, People, everyone should jump on a film project at some point just to see what it's like, because it's I think people's perspective would be influenced in a different way.
Possibly. I think it, I well no, there's the thing is, right? I think it will for that period of time.
Okay, yeah.
And then once they're away from it, then they'll revert
Go
back
right back.
to
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You know what I mean? I
So
think
true, right?
that's the problem. It'd be like, man, this is so tough. Boy, I didn't think about it like this. Man, I respect all of these people. And then they'll go to the cinema a few months later and be like, oh God, obviously they didn't do anything with this. They just you know what I mean? It will just it's that out of sight, out of mind kind of thing, I think.
True, and it's funny with film too. I think audiences, they don't, I mean, you don't want to give them too much about the magic behind like the curtain, right? But do you know a lot of film, what you see on screen is just as much about what you show as it is about what you hide or don't use? Because
Mm,
I mean, there's seminal filmmakers like Martin Scorsese. I mean, he's got Thelma as editor. That's like a marriage, right? When you're in the editing room and you're a director, and you got to cobble together, like, what am I going to use, like what fits the frame and the stage and storytelling that we're at, and how you find the film in that process. You can probably make another 3 films that are, they've got a different point of view or perspective based on what you don't use.
yeah.
So it's like the finding of the film in terms of how you want to tell the story. If people even had a sense of like what goes into that, the whole thing is just a fascinating construct.
Yeah, I do think some of that would be a big benefit for indie films, right? If you put out some of that content, right, that shows the journey of, then people get that connective tissue, right?
Hmm.
They build that empathy with you on your journey because they've seen it. They've been there for these periods of time with you. I think that could definitely be a beneficial thing for a lot of indie cats to kind of help, you know, create a connection with the viewers.
It's a great point. Yeah, it's a really great point. And you're right. Like, the independent cinema doesn't get the same acclaim, obviously, as studio made product, right? I mean, and not to say one is better than the other. I mean, it's different scale, right? When
Mm,
you tell stories, and like usually it's lower budgets. The stereotype is that they're known for character driven journey in the storytelling. Not that studio films are not, but I think the size and scope and scale is so different, right? It's like apples to oranges. But you're right, that might be a supportive means for independent filmmakers to be able to, again, allow viewers or audiences to gain more of a sense of their art. I mean, I've participated in a lot of independent cinema. It's hard to get eyes on what you're doing, right? Because you don't have the promotional budget. Like, after the film is made, you're usually bleeding money or you're running out of it, or you hope that maybe you're at the point where, okay, that we met the budget, it's great, but now it's like, now we got this whole distribution thing. And then how do you get eyes on it? And what platform? And is it only going to be one platform? And there's no theatrical release? Or it's just the challenges are more rife in that process. So I think that's a great idea if someone could come up with a way to do what you're claiming for.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, there's so many ways because when I see, because I work in communications marketing in the day job, right? And so when you see the budgets, like the marketing budget for films, it's
Oh
just
God.
I I don't know what you did with that money
Yeah.
because what I see, you haven't done a lot, right? You haven't done the things you could do to push this film, but they've spent like 2 million or something crazy, and it's just like, what are we doing here? So I think there's really interesting ways to kind of promote something, but it's just they're not really being utilized, which I can understand because you know like you've spent all your time making this thing like in an indie context. You spent all of this time making it, trying to get the money to fund it. You're not gonna be a marketing expert. So it's
Oh,
just
for sure.
you're just trying to think of things to do. So I get it, but I think there's definitely ways and collaborations that could be had, which we can see people start to flourish more.
That's it's a great point. It's amazing. Like some people are so great at creating art, but then they maybe a bit lacking maybe, or they don't have the experience on the promotional or the business side. I mean, our project, so my publicist, Amy Prenner, I think she
Mm.
even set up this opportunity. She's wonderful. Like
Oh,
she works
she's great,
so
man. I've worked with her before. She's
yeah, she's
really, really
wonderful.
nice person.
I've got Colleen Angelis, a really dear friend and colleague. She does tremendous amount of development work in the promotional space. She freelances a lot in publicity. Aaron Escobar is our promotional and development coordinator. You have to have a team of people that have these skills to be able to strategize in terms of like what is going to help the film, like to nurture it so that it gains eyes on it, so that again, if enough people see what you work on, you make the film because you have to express and you have to deliver a message, and there's something that you want to say, and there's a beautiful thing in that. But the thing, I remember in acting school, I went to the Baron Brown studio for the dramatic arts in Santa Monica, and I learned Meisner training, and there's other studios I've went to as well. I've audited at Playhouse West and Margie Aber studio. These are all wonderful places in Los Angeles where you can learn the craft. And a lot of them, and especially Joanne Barron, she's the leader of the Baron Brown studio. She used to always say, you could be the greatest in your craft, but if you're doing it in your living room and there's no audience, your potencies will be lacking because
Mm.
now what are you doing it for? That's great for your own self-expression, but we do art to be able to share it. And the publicity side, like you said, with the budgets and everything else, if you don't have that proper support after the finished product is there, it's kind of like I don't know, something that doesn't develop to the extent that it could. It's almost like a failed promise in a way, or unnurtured creativity. And that to me, that there's more sadness around that than anything else. Like I really feel bad because there's a lot of great working artists out there that they don't they've got a voice, but it doesn't command the reception maybe that it should. Like there's so much great art out there, Kevin.
Oh
So
my
many great
gosh, yeah.
filmmakers.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's, as you say, it's an important thing to work with people, right? To
Mhm.
be able to bring these things to life, because you can't do everything on your own. And other people have great ideas that can just strengthen what you do, you know? Like with this film, because you co-directed it with Ibrahim Nada, right?
Yes.
How did that come about?
Yeah. So yeah, when I wrote the feature-length screenplay, I had worked. Ibrahim Nada is a tremendous Egyptian independent filmmaker. As a director, I mean, his vision of the canvas and how he can translate visually the ideas off the page, he's tremendous. Aaron Alps, our cinematographer, is wonderful as well. At the Swedish International Film Festival, Brothers in Arms, we won the best cinematography award, and it's attributed. That's not me, Kevin. I mean, these are masters in craft that are emerging. These are tremendous filmmakers that I've worked with in the past in other projects 2, 3, 4 times, and they become friends and colleagues. And you jump on small projects sometimes, then you jump on independent films, then you jump on studio-based projects, and then you look and observe. And then in your downtime, you just kind of look at the set and you really gain a sense of everyone is working so hard, but sometimes you're fortunate to find people that they're just so good at their job.
Mm,
And then you're like, I want to work with this person again. Or if I come up with a project, that's a person that I would have no qualms about referring to. So when I got this project finished at the script level, I was like, okay, I go through my professional Rolodex. Who do I want to invite to really see this thing be created to its ultimate standard. And, Ibrahim was the first or second person on my list that I was like, you know what? He has that independent film spirit of what it's going to take to really translate this in the right way. And then Aaron is a tremendous cinematographer. I mean, he knows camera, and he just filters and lenses and camera bodies and sensors. And, how are we going to make this? We shot this on an Arri Alexa 4x3 camera with anamorphic lenses, call anamorphics. I mean, it's just, for me, that anamorphic Alexa combination, that's the stuff that just kind of, it makes me cry. It makes my heart beat out of my chest. I love the feeling that you get when you watch it with all the bokeh lights and everything else. And the climax of our film is, on a cliff off of Mulholland Drive in LA. You got all the lights in the background and these two brothers there and all their conflict. And that to me is the cinema that speaks the loudest. So I wanted to make sure to gain filmmakers and invite their inclusion and their collaboration, their ideas on this project, to really see it at the most heightened level that we can get it at. And that's really what we were aiming for. And anything that's good in the film, I always say, it's not hyperbole, it's because of their technical and creative expertise. I'm along for the ride, and I try to contribute to put them in the best environment to succeed. And that's, I think, what you're supposed to do as a producer.
Yeah, definitely. I think not everyone really sings the praises of their collaborators, though, which
They
I
should.
think is a big shame. So I think it's always great when you see people do that, right? That will give flowers to all the people that have helped them create something.
Absolutely. Kevin, it's funny too, like, you know, okay, people see you on the screen, and then maybe you gain a following of some type. And okay, that's nice that people recognize and respect your work, but they have to understand, like, your performance is being enabled, because of the 18 people that are behind the camera that the viewer doesn't see. Like, someone's got to make sure the set looks a certain way and the colors are vibing with, whatever the emotions or themes in the scene are. And then someone's got to make sure that there's continuity so that things are not out of place. And then the camera framing's got to be a certain way to capture the emotion in the scene. Like, I don't understand where sometimes the viewers or maybe even fellow actors think that they're the most important thing when they show up on set. I think we're just passing through. It's really the producer and director when you really think about it. And then whatever production house or studio that is behind you supporting the project, they're the ones that are with it the longest. They're
Mm,
hiring everyone, and they're allowing people to be put in positions where they can succeed and execute. If you don't have all those pieces, the actor is not going to be there, or the actress is not going to be there to be able to perform. And then sure enough, it's the audience that really resonates with them because they're going through the journey, identifying, through the story, through the people that are going through it on screen. But it takes a village, and you have to respect all those people in that process. They're there for you, you're there for them, but no one can make the film without all the components together. That's why these strikes were so important. I think it cast a spotlight on the industry at large, because some people got very upset. They're like, why are these people striking for so long? And other people got upset at the studios, and we're all in a marriage together. Like, it's just about sharing the pie and, reasonableness and fairness and getting there together. And it becomes adversarial sometimes when things get out of whack, but you can't do things without those other components.
mm.
You're
Yeah,
wed.
definitely. I think that's that's the big thing, right? And when people understand that, and when people just hold each other up, right? That's golden. That's gold. And
Absolutely.
it's always interesting when you see certain directors, right? I think it's like JJ Abrahams, Christopher Nolan, Pete Jackson, Sam Raimi. Like, you see that they work with a lot of the same actors and actresses and cinematographers and editors and composers. There's a this little contingent that moves together, and you just think, oh, that must be such a great environment, right? That room, that collaboration must be so good that all of these people flock back to it time and time again. And you just hope that when you're doing something, you can garner that same kind of environment.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting. So I haven't acted in a lot of Hollywood film. I mean, I was in a film called Aloha, and we shot it in Hawaii. I lived in Honolulu for well over 10 years, which is a wonderful chapter in life. And I was acting in independent films out there. And I made a lot of good friends in the filmmaking community and also in the community fabric there. It's wonderful. Shout out to Hawaii. It's a beautiful place. But Cameron Crowe decided to shoot Aloha as his film there. And Bradley Cooper and Emma Stone, Rachel McAdams, and John
Mm,
Krasinski and Bill Murray and Alec Baldwin. There were so many wonderful actors, and it was just a treat to even be on set to be able to pick their brains at a very early stage in my career. And I remember I was talking to some of the people that were working, the carpenters on set, or the people in camera department, the people in the lighting department, production design, and a lot of them were saying like Cameron Crowe is a wonderful director, great human being as well. um, they were saying we've worked together for 25, 30 years. Like it's a lot of the same team members. And,
mhm,
we see our children grow up. We invite each other to barbecues. And I'm like, what a beautiful thing that is, where you've got this working set of laborers contributing their own craft, and you go to different parts of the world, but the commonality, the continuity, the community is the people that are on the set that are together. And like, I got you. And then they can almost anticipate, like, he's got that. I've done that with him 7 times. So it makes the set operate in a better way.
mm.
Um, that really, that was a great teaching point very early on, because also you realize those people working together, they're working at their utmost to put everyone that arrives on that set in the best position to succeed. And that's a really beautiful thing. Um, I don't know if people really recognize that or understand that, because all they see is what's in the frame,
Yeah.
but they don't see like everything that goes into that filmmaking process.
Yeah. It's a funny thing, right? It's like when you look at a house and you think, oh, that's a great house. Like,
Yeah,
oh, look at these nice windows and stuff, but you don't think about the mortar between the bricks, right? The nuts that are, connecting all the joists together, that framework, all of those components of it. You're looking at the outside facade, and I think that's with so many things. It's like when stuff gets listed, a lot of the times, right, you see the writer, you see the director, the producers, some of the actors, right? And then the rest of the people, right? You never see stunt people listed on
right,
IMDb.
right.
Never see stunt people listed, which is insane. It's an insane thing that they don't get listed. There's not Oscars for stunt people in the Oscars, right? I think, well,
That's
you've got the main Oscar ceremony, and then you've got the other one a few days before where the undesirables
true.
categories are handed out, which is so disrespectful, like so disrespectful. But it's always interesting when you look at those credits of a film, like how things are listed, and you'd be like, wait, they haven't mentioned, huh? Like, why haven't? And it seems it's always kind of baffling to me that you're not shouting out all of these other people who were there doing their thing.
That's right. So this is another thing that I don't know if you do this, Kevin. I mean, you seem to be a lover of film. I always stay until the end of the credits. I mean, that's obligate. That's part of the film. The credits for me, that's part of the film. Like, you stay and you give deference. However, you like the film or not, you watch that scroll go down, and then you give regard in so doing to the people that allowed that magic to translate like that. Because I don't think anyone is more important or less important than anyone else on a film set. And you give proper respect where it's due, and I think that's one of the best ways to do that. And you're right, I think the Academy, I think they're working hard, and I think they're doing their best. I mean, they have tremendous leadership where they're trying to give regard in different categories. I mean, you don't. Again, I don't think you do things for awards. Awards make processes
Mm.
easier when you get them, but we want to make sure that people are properly heralded in the filmmaking process when they're attached to works that have tremendous execution and feeling. So I hope that continues to adjust and it evolves to where there's more fairness, because a lot of people feel the same with your salient points as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you've been on so many sets, right? Short films, feature films, TV, just all of these
Age,
different
yeah,
things, right?
sure.
And now you're behind the camera, right? So how have those past experiences helped you create the ambiance that you want on the set, right? Help create that connective tissue behind everyone that's contributing.
Yeah, I think every set is, I mean, for me, I'm first and foremost an actor, like film, TV, like that's where I live. A lot of the gestation of this project is more to advance the acting so that you know the credibility that you can gain being part of different projects, then you keep your advance, and then you get to a certain point where you're like, now you can be a bit selective in terms of the projects that you'd like to devote your acting and your craft to. For me, it's always about that first and foremost. If you can write and then participate on the production side of the directing, I don't think I've got the lens to be like a full-time director. I mean, if I compare myself to Ibrahim or others in the independent film space, some people just have that. Like
Mm,
that's probably one of the hardest roles on any project, because usually it's the director's vision that the audience is really realizing in real time when you see a film for the first time. I would say this: when you're a producer, you have the greatest imprint in terms of who's invited on the project, what the focal point is going to be, locations, camera systems, lighting. So your influence over what the audience ultimately sees, in addition to what happens in the editing room or in the shoot phase when the film's actually being filmed, the producer is like the top spot. I mean, you could say, okay, the executive producer, the production house studio, when you control the finances, of course, I mean, that's going to be a huge voice in the room. But I've commonly found, usually in the projects I've been associated with, the better projects occur where the studio is a bit more hands off, or the production company is a bit more hands off, to allow the director and the creative team to really express and translate in the manner that they see the project should be translated in, right? Because
mm,
if you allow the creatives on the project to be able to tell the story the way that they want, usually the story will be executed that way. But on the producing side, there's a reason why Best Picture Oscar, it's the producer that goes and grabs that statue, because they're the ones that live with the project well before anyone even knows what the project is. They either buy the content, they either buy the script, they develop the script, whatever it's going to be. And then long after the shoot and editing is done, they've got to be responsible to get the eyes on it by distributing it and developing strategy and everything else. So I would say actually the greatest influence in the creative or collaborative process came with me being involved as a producer. I mean, in this case, I wrote the underlying material as well. So the project is obviously very close to my heart. But I think the stamp that you can put on is the most potent as a producer. Because I hired, I think, 135 people for the short film, in addition to different service providers. And our objective was try to make something very semblant in the time that we have, even though it's short and it's proof of concept, to try to ultimately deliver a feature, but also showcase it as something with a high production value. And even though we shot it and got it all done for less than, $50,000, it a lot of people have remarked like, wow, this looks like you guys spent like about $500,000 on this. And I'm like, well, I appreciate it looks that way. It's just that the work that goes into even executing it in that sense, it's extremely challenging, right? So, and again, that's a testament to the people that you get to hire, because you want to put them in a position where they can succeed in doing that work. And
Mm.
I think that's the best way for me to, I guess, answer the question that you posed.
Yeah. Well, I think you can see with the film that, yeah, these things have come together well. Like the look and the feel of it definitely invokes that kind of gritty, hard boiled type of story, which is, yeah, very enjoyable. Very enjoyable.
Yeah.
Like, I was curious about the ending,
Yes.
right? So, how did you How did you decide, or when did the decision come that that was the ending point?
So very early on. So, okay. Damien Chazelle, have you seen his short film Whiplash? And then he ended up turning it into a feature film.
I haven't seen the short, no.
All right. So, Kevin is a tit for tat. The harder they fall, James Samuel, I've got it on my list. I want you to put Whiplash on yours, okay?
Hey, for sure, for sure.
Damien Chazelle is a tremendous filmmaker. He's
Mm,
so sharp and so talented. But uh, he created a short. I think the Whiplash short was like 18 minutes. And pretty much the whole short is a scene. It's a pressure cooker of an emerging drummer, and he's in a school setting, and he's got a militant music educator that is just, I mean, driving home like how the drumming has to be expressed, how, all of the musicians have to work in concert. And then the way it ends, it's such a pressure cooker. Okay. So a lot of short films that I've seen, sometimes they have a linear quality where you begin at the beginning of the story follows along the characters, introduce them, there's an arc, there's some sort of a obstacle to overcome, and then the film ends with some type of silver lining, or sometimes it ends maybe unresolved in maybe a cute way or in a way that makes you reflect on it after the fact. In this one, because the ultimate goal, I mean, the short film is a standalone film, of course, to introduce the characters and the story environment and the underlying feature film. But I wanted for people to capture themselves in following the characters in the story, feeling something, and then at the end it on a crescendo where it just stops. And then from
mm.
there, so many people have watched that film, and theatrically, we in the premiere that we had, and the times that we've had it even in the cinema so far, people are like, "No, wait, is that it? No, no, I want to know what happens.
Yeah.
I got into this thing, like I want to see like what's going to happen, what's going on with the project." That is exactly the intention that we wanted to elicit, so that when producers see it and development executives, after it's done, they're like, I wanted the wow effect, so that now they get introduced to the characters, but also let's get behind this. Let's make this so that it gets seen in its intended way. Because if people are feeling that right now, when the story is just emerging, let them see the entire film and story develop on the intended canvas that it deserves.
Okay, that makes sense, right? I'm watching it, and then it ends like that, and I'm just like,
Come on. Yeah. It's like, yeah.
you're just like, all right, but what next,
Well, what
right?
next?
Because we know the thing's meant to happen. So how can the thing happen when this has just gone down? Like, what?
Yes.
Where are we going, Jordan?
Right.
Where are we going?
Right.
Right? That was the thing. I mean, because it kind of like it's like the ending of like an episode of The Wire or something like
There
that,
you
right?
go.
But all right, next Friday, episode 2.
Yeah.
But there's no fucking episode 2.
Right. Right.
You son of a bitch, Jordan.
I
Like,
know.
what are
I'm
you doing?
sorry. I'm sorry. I know. Yeah. I'm working really hard for episode 2. I'm working real hard. We're all working hard, man. Yeah. I'll be sure that you'll be on the first of those on the list to be able to see the feature. Absolutely.
Uh,
Great.
oh man. Yeah, no, I feel you've definitely created something to intrigue.
Hmm.
So people are like, okay, where's this going? Right? How can this end? Right? What's the outcome here?
Right.
Because it doesn't look good. Like, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's just like I can't see how anyone's going to be happy at the end of this. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? So it's just like, so yeah, I definitely think the intrigue has been built. And it's just like, yeah, it just hopefully someone like hit you with that check so we can, see where it's gonna go.
We're trying, yeah. The spellbinding element like that, where it's like, okay, abrupt, and then you're like, no, like you want some of that too. Like you said, like when you see what happens in the feature length story, I mean, that's just there's a lot of tip of the iceberg stuff in there. You see where the characters are. There's a couple scenes in there that are straight out of the feature script because we wanted to show that it can play and translate well in the long format.
Mm,
So we did that intentionally as well. But yeah, there's a lot of secrets in the feature length script. There's some things that were heralded in the short film where you're like, well, what caused that, or why did that happen? And then when you see how it unfolds in the feature, I mean, these two brothers are on a pressure cooker. I mean, they start. It's I kind of want to play with this accordion idea with the two characterizations where they're both on opposite sides of the law, and then Nick, the character that I play in the film, he's on the straight and narrow to begin, but then he starts unraveling as he realizes that, my brother is this archetypal type villain. And then the more villainous brother, he starts taking on the tendencies of his brother, where he's starting to expose his vulnerability. So it's almost like they crisscross in terms of like their character aptitudes. And that gets more explored later in the film as well. Like they both
right.
almost become morally gray. So there's a bit of that as well.
Okay. Okay. There's yeah, there's certain things in the short where I'm just like, how did they get there though? Right? Why
Yes,
did that happen?
right.
And you're just like, I wish I kind of wish that I knew that.
Yeah,
But
you got
then
the
there's
taste.
the wonder, like, oh, but will they explore that in the film?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We gave you morsels, a bit of a taste to try to get it to go to where it has to, but there's more that is definitely explored absolutely in the longer format.
Hmm.
We got to
And
wait.
yeah, I mean, yeah, but you've written the feature film, and then it was just like, okay, let's do a short to show people what we can do. So did that story come to you instantly? How long did that take to kind of think, how to set the stage for this without, giving too much away, without watering anything down, you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah, our goal with that, I mean, there's a lot of ways to tell a short. I mean, you could do a short in 5 minutes where you can make like a lot of filmmakers go through this exercise right before they start. It's like, okay, I'm going to make a short, and then do I make it into almost like a sizzle reel type film where it's like
Mm,
we're just going to highlight and pay lip service to a few things, then it's done? Or do you do like a 8 minute short, a 10 minute short, 12 minute, 18? I mean, if you want to use film festivals as your method of deployment, it's usually better, they say, to keep it short. Ultimately, you should tell the story that you want to tell, but sometimes it's like, okay, you make a 30-minute film and their job is to posit as many creative filmmakers in their slots if they're only picking 55 or 60. And then at that point it's like, well, if you got a 30-minute, I can fit three films in 30 minutes instead of one
yeah.
30 minute. So you might kind of dismiss maybe some of your opportunities at the festival level if you really want to use that as your modicum of proliferation. Our intention here was almost exclusively, I mean, we did submit it to Film Fest. We gained some acknowledgments, nominations, award. That's all wonderful. We're very appreciative of the support that we got at the festival level. But for us, it was more, let's showcase this in the manner that it's intended in. And that is, it needs the 2 hour plus treatment. Like this thing is a crime saga in like its semblant of how Heat, like it follows the supporting characters and their lives and how they're intertwined. And like every supporting character in the feature length screenplay, they have their own microcosm of their own story, their backstory, and how they're affected by this conflict between these two brothers. That is not introduced in the greatest sense in the short. I think we really focused on Nick's journey in terms of how a lot of the discovery is unraveled, and then where it gets to that penultimate moment at the end. But in the feature, I mean, every character is impacted by what happens with the brokenness and tragedy of what happens with these two men, and then how people are going to have to go through this almost life episodic process where the saga unfolds, and then you're going to have to find a way to either overcome or the positive lining in terms of the fact that, okay, things went down, shit has happened, we're going to have to get through this, or there's going to be a lot of dire consequences in the process. And that's what really it explores.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Oh man. And how can people get to see the short?
Yeah, so we had to keep it close to the vest. We went to American Film Market. That was kind of like our big introduction. It's now played in the cinema. We've got it now through the Oscar qualification process in the short film, live action short film category. So Academy viewers, they can actually see it in the Academy screening room that's just devoted to the actual voting membership within the Academy for that. We're going to eventually have it on the website. If people want to find out more about the film, it's at www.watchbrothersinarms.com. That's watchbrothersinarms.com. I've got a few things on my own personal website, actorjordancharles.com, which pays some lip service to some of the film content as well. We'll put stuff up on my Instagram page. Actor Jordan Charles is the handle there. And then eventually, I think the film, we're probably going to have some sort of a screening room on the actual Watch Brothers in Arms website. I think that's important. That way it can get its own light of day. We'll probably eventually have it on Vimeo and YouTube, and then maybe try to get it on some short film platforms. But right now, because we're so engrossed into reaching out now to different studio corners to try to rally film development support and financing, and now we're sending it out to intended cast members, we're really pushing now to go through the proper steps to gain the financing sourcing so that we can start putting the pieces together to get this thing into production and get it actually shooting to become the feature that it should be.
Hmm. Boy, it's a process.
It's a process, Kevin. It's years, man. It's years. Like that's another thing I hope people realize with all independent filmmakers. Like you go through a lot. You go through a lot because you want to share, right? You want to share your art and your creativity, and you want people to feel and take something away with what you're trying to visually express. But it's work. It's work like anything else. And it's beautiful work and beautiful pain sometimes.
Well, man, I
Privilege.
think it's definitely paying off. It's definitely paying off. Like, yeah, as I say, I'm intrigued. I want to know what happens next. And Amy in the copies that sent over, mentioned the other three or four scripts you've got in the can that you're gonna work on. Again,
Yes.
interested.
Yeah, I've
Interested.
actually got one that I wrote. It's kind of like in the vein of like an Indiana Jones adventure story, kind of like Indiana Jones meets National Treasure, where this family of treasure hunters are chasing this long lost artifact. So that's more kind of like on the adventure bent. I've also got one that I'm finishing up. It's on the current migrant crisis.
Mm,
There's statistics out there. Do you know there's like 300,000 people they estimate that are coming in through the southern border of the United States every single month? I mean, you talk about displacement and leaving what you know to come to a new country. And that resonates with me as well, because again, my parents and their immigrant experience, it's funny. We call them immigrants before, but now we call them migrants because a lot of them don't go through the legal process channel. But
mm,
the journey is still the same. It's leaving everything you know behind to kind of
yeah.
come through. I was asking my mom the other day, I'm like, Mom, when you guys came through back, when it was like right after the war, I'm like, how did you decide what to bring and what you had to sell or leave? And she goes, son, she goes, you bring a suitcase and you bring whatever cash you can scrounge, and then you pray that you go to a locality where there's enough friends of family or whatever to get yourself back on your feet, and then you just chip away to try to gain progress to kind of lift yourself up. And I'm like, I don't think people recognize, when we get further removed from war, and war is so terrible in and of itself, what people have to go through and just the different stories that you
Mm.
can tell in that to even educate people. Like, I always want to be part of filmmaking like that, Kevin. I don't know if you always want a dialogue on certain type of filmmaking, but filmmaking that speaks to you on a very deep emotional level, and it can also maybe teach or shine spotlight on stories that we're not necessarily exposed to. Like, for me, that's what it's all about. I mean, we're all part of a human community, right? So I think that the more things that are told on that level, the more we all benefit as a community.
Yeah, I mean, I love a fantasy tale like Lord of the Rings. Peter
Oh,
Jackson
awesome.
did wonderful things with those. I have watched those films so many times, right? I knew my girl was the person to marry when she also was just like, I remember the Lord of the Rings cartoon. Oh yeah, every year I watch the trilogy as well, and
Awesome.
I'd be like, okay, I feel we need to be together, right? But
That's so great.
also, I just those, as you said, the films that educate you, the films that like inform you on stuff. I've watched some films on like human trafficking,
Yeah.
and they're horrendous.
Yeah.
Right? Like no, I should rephrase that. The films are good. It's just the subject matter is horrendous. And you just it feels like a part of you is just being scarred by this, and knowing that this stuff happens every hour, every day, right? And the thing I remember, I forget why I was looking at something about immigration and migration and all of that kind of stuff. It was for some film, I forget though, but you then have, so it's that whole experience, right? Having to leave stuff behind, leave family behind, friends behind, to go and set up somewhere new, which is crazy. That's crazy enough.
It
But
is.
then you hear about the predators that are on the borders, right? So a big form of human trafficking is from wars. So the people fleeing a war torn country, you have these assholes who then snatch the women, the girls, the kids, right? And then sell them into slavery. Then you've got like the people taking people to be drug mules, right? You've got the people that will just rape women.
All of
Like,
that.
not just not for to take them into trafficking or drug muling or anything, just because they're sadistic, nasty pieces of trash. So they're raping women, kids on this, but people know that. But it's like, what do I do? Right? Do I stay where I am? And there's we can't support ourselves. Like, there's nothing here. So we need to go to give our kids, our family this opportunity, but we're running the risk of this. But it's just like, I'll do that if it gets me here. I remember listening on Rogan's podcast, right? He was talking to, I think it's Wiley Park, the girl from North Korea.
Okay.
And she's like, when her and her mum fled, right? Her mum, these people wanted to rape her, but her mum was like, "Do do me instead."
That's God's sakes.
And
Yeah.
you just hear these stories, and it's just like horrendous. But you don't know about this stuff a lot of times until you've seen it in a film, read it in a book, like in some form of story, that you're enlightened by this stuff. Because a lot of times in Hollywood, we see one side of it.
Right.
right? But we don't see the whole magnitude of a situation, and it's just it's tough, but it's so important to see,
But,
so important to see.
yeah, and I think, Kevin, I mean, I agree, like, it's a complicated world, right? Like, I mean, what
Mm,
like, I look at a lot of I'm not big on, like, social media and things like that. I just don't like to digest information, like, where it's just snippets, and then, you base, like, a whole objective view on something after you look at something for 15 seconds, and then you
yeah.
carry the next 15 seconds, and, like, where the majority of people, I think, are gaining their news, I think we all have to do some self-reflection. Like, it's like you said, war can be so debased and evil, like, in terms of what it does. Sometimes it fosters change. It's a change maker for something better to evolve, right? Like, but it's just that it requires so much sacrifice and suffering and death and all these tragedies and terrible acts that you're describing. But that again is the power of cinema too, right? Where, if cinema speaks to you and you use it as a didactic form of information or knowledge, you're able to watch something on some prescient important topic and then say, wait, I wasn't even aware of that. Like, I wasn't aware of that suffering or the genocide that's happening in that part of the world. And then it rallies something or stimulates something in you to say, well, who's doing work at that level to help people that are
Mm,
being victimized by that? And then maybe now you're going to rally around a charity or some local cause, or rally support around a politician or your local representative that sparks some type of change or can gain some positive or foster some development that might be able to impact or affect the people that are being affected by what you saw on the screen. If cinema can do that as a tool, that's amazing. Books can do that. Television can do that. I mean, some people do benefit concerts to do things like that. Like, I rally around a lot of causes like Amnesty International or Greenpeace, or I mean, there's so many. My parents kind of imbued that at us from a very young age, where they had to rely on organizations to help them when they were coming across. So you don't forget things like that. So I think, again, we have to kind of dispel this notion that people feel like they're alone. You're never really alone. Like, you can participate in things to have greater impact or effect. And if cinema can again shine spotlight on causes or movements or change making opportunities, that that is something that we can all become part of, right? Then we all become part of the collaborative effort into whatever stands behind the subject matter to make the world that is being reflected a better place. That's all I want to do as an actor. I just
mm.
want to be part of stories that are meaningful, and then gain more and more stature in the industry, so that then you can use that to lift as many people up as you can in the industry to continue making positive films or films that speak to something, and then use that exposure to rally around causes or work with UN or work with different nonprofits. I think that's the end game, I think, at least for me.
Yeah. No, definitely. I watched Rustin last week, and it was so interesting because I had never heard the name,
Right.
right? Like, you heard of the march,
Yeah.
never heard the
Never
name,
heard the name.
never
Yeah.
heard the name Rustin.
Yeah.
And it's just like, if a film can enlighten you to something like that, to someone that has been shifted out of the gaze,
Absolutely.
I think it's so valuable, to be able to do that. And it doesn't hurt that, you know what I mean, the performances were incredible. Like, the film
Absolutely.
was actually good, which is just like, that's so great, because it'd be terrible if that film was terrible, right? And
Yeah. Right.
you know what I mean, that we finally hear about this person, but it's just like, ugh. So the
Yeah.
fact that the film was really good, but it's just crazy that no one has uttered the name up to that. Now, like, there may have been a documentary or a bit part in another film, but I just don't recall it, you
But
know?
also, Kevin, I was going to say too, like, see, it's great to look at content like that, and then it's like, wow, now I understand, and now maybe I want to learn more. But I actually think that all important second step, I don't think people should lose either, where don't just rely on the film, obviously. I think it's really important for that to be the spark, because that's
Mm,
one point of view, right? Like, I think
yes.
it behooves us to look at multiple point of views. Go look at the event or the historical activity academically, like check articles, seek out documentaries, because then you're going to become more knowledgeable and more involved. I think, again, cinema is really good at creating the spark, but I hope it doesn't stop there, because sometimes there's going to be fictional elements to
Oh,
allow a story to take
all the
place
time.
narratively, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing is, if it becomes the initial incitement, the spark, all the power to it. But then
Mm,
continue from there, right? Like, it
yeah.
just, and that's fantastic. I remember when I watched Chernobyl. I think it was a 6-part miniseries. The creatives behind that, they did such an amazing job on that. And my mind goes to like the miners that go in, and it's like, look, you're probably going to get radiation exposure. And it's like, are you going to take care of my family? Yeah, we'll give you double time or whatever it was. And that caused me to read up on their stories. And it's like, can you imagine having to make that decision, saying, okay, I got to go up and help get them to there, clean up, and then probably it's a death sentence.
Mm,
But yet you still go in for the greater good of the nation or the community. And it's like just that small part of that story that probably doesn't get told if you don't see it. Like, so many instances like that are so powerful.
yeah. Oh, for sure. But you are definitely right. You have to then do your own research, right? You have to, because with a film, with a book, with a TV show, things get shifted around, right? I remember watching the Tetris film,
Right.
which wasn't bad. Like, I didn't know what to expect. I'm like, a film about blocks? Like, how? But you watch it and you're like, actually, this isn't bad. But then when you read up about it,
Yeah.
right? This is the thing. So I watch the film, do the review, but in doing that, right, I have to find the information, right? I have to find a synopsis so I can tell people, like, find out who's in it so I can tell people that. But then in doing that, you then go down these rabbit holes and you're like, oh, what's this? Oh, yeah. So it's talking about, oh, wait, that didn't happen the same year? And you find out the timeline in Tetris, those things happened,
Happened,
but
but
not
not.
how they're shown,
That's
right?
right.
Happened, some of those things were years apart, but in the film, it's all within like the frame of a month or something. But it's just like, no,
Right.
it didn't go like that. So
Funny
it's
thing
just,
about that. So just to interrupt you. So
no,
Hank Rogers, actually, the film follows a lot of his story too. He's actually his daughter's a really good friend and colleague of ours. Actually, when I lived in Hawaii, that was part of a larger circle that we had, and he's a very, very gracious man. I remember he did a New Year's celebration one time at his house, and really interesting guy. Like, he made an announcement that he's taking steps to make his entire life sustainable. And I didn't know at that time like what that meant. I mean, I follow a lot of environmentalism. It's a passion of mine, but he was showing me some of the actions and activities and how he was planning to live his life or reduce carbon and the nonprofit that he created. But then I remember, like, you see the Tetris film, and it just, like you said, there's some things that you got to be careful of, but it scratches the surface. But
mm,
it should compel you to want to read more about the underlying humanity in the stories and what makes the people tick and what they're all about. And then when you meet the people, like even on a social level where you know them personally, that's a whole other dynamic that that most viewers don't get as well. Like, it's all, again, part and parcel of just, it's continuing education, right?
yeah,
Great. It's wonderful.
yeah. I think films could be used in so many other ways, right? Because with all of this stuff, there's this larger tapestry, right? And you're trying to get people to learn, you're trying to get people to pay attention in schools and things like that. Use films, right? So you can show them a film and then be like, okay, so what were the historical inaccuracies in this film? I
Right.
want you to point them out to me. So that's the homework, right? Which then means people have to then go read about the subject, right?
Absolutely.
And there's so many different things you could do and be like, okay, so in Tetris, all of that stuff happened in 2 months, but do you think that could? Like, and then be like, oh, okay, so I've got to write about that. And then you go, you read and be like, oh, that was actually, there's a 5 year period in which that went down and they didn't actually get the rights when they went to the event in Japan. It was like after
Yeah.
that happened. So you're getting people to learn, but in a fun way. You know what I mean? I just think, boom, you could do that, right? You could do these things, and then it then changes the way people look at things, right? Because as you said earlier, right? It's just people digest information in these short forms, and then they take it verbatim, right? This crazy thing I remember reading is I've got this other kind of news podcast I throw out there,
Nice.
and I was reading about in Scotland the rate of STIs and abortions had gone up. And
Really?
they were saying because people are watching these videos on TikTok where people are being like, oh, birth control is bad. Oh, this is condoms are bad and they can create these, give you seizures and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, firstly, who's watching a stupid TikTok video and going, that's all real? You know what I mean? That's insane to me. But we, you know what I mean? I feel school could be used as a vehicle to teach people how to communicate properly, how to look at information, how to be analytical about what they're consuming, and not just take one source and go, oh, that's it, and be like, actually, let me see what they're saying over here. And let me see what they're saying here. And then when you've got all of that information, you can go, so how do I view this now? Like, what do I actually think is the case?
I
You
love
know,
it.
and that's not, we don't do that. And film is a vehicle which can be used to help put people on that road.
That's awesome, Kevin. Yeah, that's amazing. It's funny. My brother-in-law is Scottish. He married my sister. Shout out to Kilmarnock, Scotland. That's where he's from. So, yeah, he's great. He's a huge soccer fan. Great guy. But I got to ask him about that. See, you just put something on my radar now. It makes me want to go see the content, and then you can learn, right? But
Mm,
it's interesting too. Do you know how many people I've come across in the filmmaking industry? Like as an actor on set, you talk to people. Like, I mean, our set, we had women that led departments. We had, I mean, my fellow producer, Courtney King, she's amazing. Like, we had, I've got people on set, transgender. We've got, you know, people that are from different cultures, religions, creeds, nationalities, people that were here like on they got their first credit on a film. Like, you're all coming from different walks of life, and then you're sharing and contributing to the experience of making something. But then you think those same people are also, they become viewers where they're watching something, and then they see the point of view of the cinema, and then they take their own point of view in terms of what they're watching in that point of view, and that leads to some sort of a value judgment or something like that. But a lot of them, you know what they tell me set to set when I travel, even as a working actor, freelancing, do you know how many people tell me they come from different countries and they rely on American cinema where they watch it and it teaches them how to speak English?
mm, mm,
But just think about that from a pure didactic standpoint, where you could take a course, get a tutor, take an English course, whatever, but you watch films over and over and over in the vernacular, what's being expressed, now their inflection of speech, and it actually can teach you language. Like that, to me, that is incredible. Like, because then now the way you're learning the language, you're learning it in narrative form. So now that's also going to predispose you likely to wanting to watch more and more film. And
mm.
that is like your educational like stimulus. Like, it's incredible. Like, you're right. The power of cinema, I think we might be just scratching the surface on this. I think you're right. It can go way further than it is right now. And that's
Oh, for
wonderful.
sure. For sure. Like I forget what podcast I was listening to, but the guy was talking about how because his parents were immigrants and they're saying how they came over. And so they were like, oh, we need English names. Right? We need English
Right,
names.
right.
And so the dad took Rocky because that was what he was watching Rocky, and so it's just like
Yeah.
Rocky. And the mum had another funny name, but I can't remember what that was. But they took the names from characters that they were watching all the time.
Isn't that great? Yeah, I heard I don't know if this is an urban legend. I keep forgetting to go look it up, and I sorry if it's not true if I'm misspeaking, but so Charles Bronson, a famous action star in the 70s. I mean, all the films that he did. I forget what country he came from, Hungarian or something like that. He came from Europe, but he apparently was auditioning, and on the Paramount lot, I think he wrote down his original name, and then I guess the person at the check-in table, they're like, "No, you can't use that. Like, there's not. That's just too long. Like, you should use something else or whatever." He was inspired to take a different name. Apparently, he looked around. He's like, "Wait a sec, Paramount Studios. That's Bronson Street. Put down Bronson." And then that's how he got like his action. Like, it's crazy. Like, some of the stuff, the genesis of identity and name making in Hollywood, that, like, I'm sure books have been written out on this.
Mm,
It's unreal. Like, it's just, but at the same time, I mean, your identity on the screen is very different than your identity in real life, right?
yes.
So, I mean, you're there for a purpose to characterize the person that's on the page. So, like, there's also something in that as well, where you know you're paying homage to something that has feelings or something that is mirroring humanity, but it's actually invoking some of yourself in that as well, but not your whole self. And I think there's something to be explored there further as well, in terms of like how we're carving out our identity in the frame or in the storytelling, versus the fact that there's a whole humanity component that is altogether separate from that too. Like, it's very interesting, the juxtapositions that are explored in that process.
Yeah, because you're trying to craft something, from these words and imbue it with this soul.
Yes.
But it's just like, what's the right way to do that?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what's the way that will resonate the most? And I think it was crazy watching Lord of the Rings because in your head, you're like, oh, Boromir's going to be like this. And Frodo's obviously like this, right? Arrogant. Oh, yeah, Strider, he would be. And then watching it and being like, yeah, that's exactly how I envisioned them. Oh
Right.
my God, that's Bilbo. That's right. That's Gandalf. Oh my God. And then seeing like Nuremberg and Gondor and, Rivendell and being like, get out my head, Peter Jackson. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
totally, right? Do you
Yeah.
know, it's funny, I'm a huge LOTR fan as well. I mean, Peter Jackson's amazing. I went to New Zealand a couple of years ago for a friend's wedding, and we were pitching another project there, and I met with some of the folks at Peter's company. They're wonderful, amazing people. And I got to visit Park Road Post and the post-production facilities and everything that Peter has done there to allow the filmmaking industry in that country, never mind just the region,
Mm,
just take like the next step. Like, that man is tremendous, and Felipe, like their whole team, these are just good people, great artists, talented people. But it's funny, like what you were saying, like how you're following the characterization. There's an independent film that I acted in where I had to play two characters in two different timelines. And it's like what you were saying before, like, how do you know like how to represent that, or how do you act that character? I think it's really important sometimes. I don't know, I find this as an actor, maybe it's a training, like you, you want to feel a little bit lost, because you're playing moments, and if you feel like you've reached the zenith, like, I got this character, I got you always want to leave a little bit where you're always in the state of process, where
mm,
you're
mm.
trying to find because in doing that, I think that that creates the naturalism, right? Because
Yes.
human beings are not altogether complete. So you want to show that, like, what you're traversing in terms of your feelings, what you're emoting, what you're discovering in that scene as it's happening in real time. You're supposed to be discovering it like the audience sees it after it's filmed. And I think as human beings, we're doing that as well. Like, something, you're going along your plan in life. I got my schedule, my calendar, and boom, something happens, a car accident. Maybe it's like I get a new piece of news, or oh, wow, I turn on the telly and like this is happening. And you're uncovering that in real time. I think some of that needs to be reflected in performance as well, at least good performance.
Oh,
Try to follow that anyway.
yeah, no, for sure. Like, I, animation is something that I think really highlights this a lot, right? Because you have these things and people doing the voices, and a lot of times you're like, that's that's Will Smith, right?
Right.
Or oh, that's you know, uh, Blanchett, right? And you're just like, oh, but then other times you'll have something and be like, oh man, that's so fun. Like, who the fuck voiced
Yeah,
thingy
who is
thing? And
that?
then you
Yeah,
look and you be like, wait, that was shut up. That wasn't, oh my god. Actually, yeah, now I think I kind of get it a little bit, but
totally.
I
Yeah.
did not get that. I didn't get that they voiced that. And I think that is just the epitome of acting. Like when someone can imbue a role with something completely different to them, right? But there's still sometimes a little element of them there, but it just feels like something brand new. That
Yeah,
is phenomenal.
I
That's so
agree.
great.
I agree. Like, it's amazing because I mean, the way I I had really good teachers to date, and the learning never stops. I mean, you always have to refine your craft and stay and study in school. But on the acting front, I mean, I'm very, very passionate about acting and like giving purpose and respect for the craft, the work. It's a challenge. Like every project, you start it and you kind of get goosebumps, and you're like, okay, I want to find this character, and I want to give credence to what this person is going through in the greater story. But you never really arrive, Kevin. Like it's interesting. Like there's always something where after you're finished, you're like, it's interesting that I got that out of like my scene partner, and then they're going to translate it a certain way as well. And when you're doing animation is a bit different because you've got to emote so much through voice, and then you're
Mm,
relying on the digital rendering to actually translate the physicality of the performance. Because physicality and performance, when it's live action, when it's just they're showing you your body and your voice, that's different because there's an adage in Meisner training: behavior never lies. So your voice and its inflection, everything else, it's supposed to be imbued by all of the physicality in your body and the performing. And I mean, in stage, we take that to a whole different level, right? Because it's obviously way more expressive on stage than if you're doing television and film. But
yeah.
that's all part of it, though, right? Like what you're expressing, what comes out of you, it's coming out of every orifice, right? Like it's every physicality that you have is supposed to be imbued in the performance. And there's something magical in that too, that, you're feeling something at such a deep emotive level that every part of you is in that performance. And it's amazing. Like I have a lot of respect for you watch a film, and you're like, wow, that person can't be any more different in real life than what they are. And that's you can't find that in a lot of,
Mm,
right? Like it's incredible.
yeah, no, it really is. It's so great when you get that, you know. It's just I mean, what was it like when you cast this film and then you think, oh, these people will be great for these roles, and then you run those scenes and you get that performance, you get that. It was like when you were talking with your wife and she's just like, what's wrong? Like, oh, we got these restaurants, but if you want to stay home, just just let me know, Nick. And you're just like, yeah, cancel the reservation. Like just getting that performance. Like, what was that feeling when you hit, you know, you ran that scene or some of the other scenes, and you were like, oh, that's such a great performance. Like, how does that feel to you?
Do you know, it's funny you mentioned that scene in the film. That most of that scene was actually improvised. So
Oh,
Ibrahim, our director, yeah, he was like, let's kind of do a few off the cuff where just kind of go with each moment and what feels natural, which is again, that comes straight out of Meisner training. You play moments, right? You do, it's almost like you do all your backstory, you know what the relationships are, but then you're wanting to project and perform a specificity like how you're feeling, and then you throw all that out, and then action happens, and all the magic's supposed to happen before they all cut.
mm,
So it's you. What is the other person doing? How do you feel about it? That's like acting 101, right? And it's take what the scene partner is giving, relate to them, express how you feel, observe, and then in that, it's funny in the moments in the film where the real visceral moments, you do forget that you're acting. You do. And it's a lot of like Daniel Day-Lewis and the method actors where they're like, they almost embody the role in the performance.
mm,
Sometimes you can get to that level, and some people say some of that is unhealthy or some of it's not. I mean, you can take whatever acting or training tradition into your preparation, but when you're in the moments in the frame, it's really you and the other person, and sometimes you yourself, if it's, you know, you're just on camera or on stage, there's something cathartic that is taking place, and it's I think people express it, they feel it in different ways. They I think what it does to them in the moment is very different. It's fascinating, right? You think, oh, it's all acting and everyone acts the same way. No, you could line up 10 different actors and actresses, and then you could have them perform the same scene, same line, same inflection, but what they're going through in that experience is different, all 10 of them. And all of that needs to be respected. There is no right or wrong way to do it, right? But it's funny, the audience, if you would line up 10 audience members, they'll look at the 10 people performing and they're going to get something different from
mm.
the person that does it. And they're like, but I like the way this person did it, that person did it. How can you not like that one? Like it's fascinating. It's all interpretive art. And that also is what makes it beautiful because we have such shades as human beings that we're putting into that performance. And then people, the way they're receiving it, they receive it differently. It's all magic, right? It's just
Oh,
amazing.
yeah, for sure. Because when you think about all the different people that have played like Sherlock Holmes, you know,
Right.
Dracula, Hercule Poirot. I mean, to me, David Suchet is the one only Hercule Poirot.
He's
But
good. Yeah,
you
it's
know
good.
what I mean? But there's so many people that
Really
have
good. Yeah.
played. Oh man, it's mon ami.
Yeah.
I just love David. Oh, you know, early at the beginning of the year, we went to this classical performance, and it was really interesting because David Suchet narrated like these moments in between the music numbers. And
Wow.
I'd never seen that before, and it was so good. It was so good. It was like, whoa.
See
But
that?
yeah, David Suchet is phenomenal.
So good. I like what Benedict Cumberbatch did with Sherlock. He's so
Mm.
talented. And then I'm trying to think the other Sherlock, Johnny Lee Miller with Elementary.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
He put a different bent on it too. It's amazing again how you can find like your intention and purpose and specificity with the same character, and again it's got different texture and shades. It's amazing.
Mm. Yeah. No, that I think that's one of the fun things about all of this when you get to see like people different people put their mark on something, and it's always just so interesting, right? And I think that's a really valuable point of having a diverse and inclusive workplace and industry, because you get to see how different voices interpret this material, right?
Absolutely. And you know, Kevin, another thing with like I'm really big on that. I mean, when you come with immigrant heritage, I mean, you live diversity and inclusion. I mean, that's what it is. Like I don't know if that even can be understood by people that don't. I mean, look at what's happening in the Ukraine and I mean, so African nations and now the Middle East. Like, there's so many different places that are in conflict right now. It's going to lead to people that have to depart and leave, and we just repeat these patterns over and over. And it's just something
Mm,
from ourselves. I don't know what we can speak of that of, but having said that, diversity and inclusion, I don't think those are like that's not a concept. I think that's a practice. Like it's how we actually undertake and exercise it to make the fabric of our community more representative of the world around us and the lives that are being lived. And I was really proud of that even on our film that, we had, I don't know how many nations, like almost 30, I think, people that their heritage came from different countries. And, you know, I like that. I like being part of that and having a leadership role in fostering that sense of inclusion and community because there's also con- there's positive contributory factors with this. When you bring people with different viewpoints, different heritage into a creative process, they're going to come up with ideas that blow you away.
mm.
And then you execute those ideas. You wouldn't have otherwise come to those ideas without their inclusion on the project because their worldview is different, their traditions are different, and then the way that they look at subject matter is different. And then the audience member that's in the audience, they're going to take something different away because their heritage themselves is different. Like the blending that goes on because of the diversity and inclusion, that is in and of itself such a beautiful process that needs to be preserved. It's you can't get the art otherwise without inviting that. And that needs to be championed as much as possible.
Oh, for sure. For sure. It's one of those weird things, right? Because there's always these moments where there's these certain initiatives and you can always clearly see it, right? That, oh, we need more women in leading roles, like we need more black people in leading roles, we need more Latino, we need more,
Absolutely.
and then you see this glut of projects trying to do that thing, and it's always feels a bit weird, a bit manufactured, because my kind of thing is I wish we lived in a world where we didn't need, you know, gosh, I forget what it's called now, but like where you have to have a number of,
Oh,
right?
right, right.
You know what I
Quota.
mean? Yeah, because if we could just be in a place where there are no barriers, right? Where you're getting things on the merit of what you're bringing rather than a quota. That's what, God damn it. That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah, rather than you're filling a quota. Now, I understand why quotas are there because otherwise, a lot of times people wouldn't get those roles, but you just wish that you could just remove all the barriers, right? That people were, when they're looking to hire people, they're not thinking, oh, well, he looks like me, so I'm going to employ him. Where it's just like, actually, she's got a real great vision. I'll bring her on board. Or, that guy over there, he doesn't look like me, but I like the way he's talked about this project and what he would bring to this project. So let's bring them on board. I wish it was that, right? I wish it was that because you get so much from a situation when the pool you're drawing from is rich and diverse, because you get these different mindsets where the amount of times, right? I go to, organizations and they're like, right, we want to do this with our product, our service, right? And you're thinking, okay, and you talk to them and you're like, right, we could do this, this, and this. And they don't give you the job. They give it to someone that looks like them.
Right.
But now they're getting same old, right? And it's just like you will never get anything different if you just keep on going to the same well.
I agree. Kevin, I have strong feel. I like your views on this too. I have strong feelings on this too. Like remember my dad had a lot of vulnerabilities because he felt. I think he had a grade 8 education. I mean, like his family was, I mean, torn apart. And then he had a lot of siblings, and he was an excellent soccer player. And then they were recruiting him like a South American team. They're like, he's got talent. His mom was like, I lost my son. Someone to war, and my husband, and so my grandmother made him stay at home. And then at the top of a mountain where they were in Italy, there weren't a lot of educational opportunities when the war was going on. So he ended up having to learn a trade. He became a welder. And my parents are very blue collar. My mom was like sterilizing instruments in an operating room. We didn't come from a lot of wealth, right? And my
Mm,
dad, he always had this vulnerability that he uh he felt like he was embarrassed at his lack of education, because I
mm,
think if he was
mm,
educated, he would have became like a doctor, a physician, He loved nature and like the effect of nature on processes, and he's very technically astute, really good. Like again, like a lot of broken or failed promise, sadly, but he achieved a lot despite of the shortcomings that he had to overcome. But like I realized this, there's so many people that have tremendous potential, right? And because of the way they look or the way that they participate or not able to participate because of their language challenges, or they come from a heritage that is maybe frowned upon in light of what global events are going on. We always look to art to become like it's like the lead indicator of where society's supposed to progress to. Like it has to be art that does that. And it kind of dispels like wrongful notions, and it again it shines like spotlight, or it provides indications of where we can be as a society or a community or a human family. Like what better medium than art through paintings or the visual frame or literature to be able to do that, right? Because if we can get engrossed through an emotional process to say that, this person should belong or this voice should be heard, that has tremendous power to be able to lead to the inclusivity that we want to see, that is supposed to reflect our world. I think people need to get out and travel, because if you're I guess saturating cinema of only a certain type, or you're reading only certain books by a certain author, the world is a big grand place filled with differences,
mm.
diversity. Like that needs to be realized by as many human beings as possible, to recognize that we're part of a far more expansive community than we realize.
Oh, for sure. For sure. It's the beauty of a film festival, right? That you get to see
Yes,
so many different things from so many different places. And I guess it is one of the triumphs of digital media, right? Netflix, Apple, Disney, Prime, because now you've got films from all over the place, TV from all over the place, so people, if they're open to just exploring and trying, they can check out stuff from different countries.
absolutely. You're right. I think you hit it on the head. That is actually the most rich quality of the different streaming platforms, that you can otherwise discover cinema that you may have never had exposure to, and filmmakers
Mm.
from foreign countries or far off places. And now it's like, and you sometimes it'll surprise you, where it's like you'll watch the film, it blows you away. You're like, wait a sec, that film actually represents my worldview. How can someone that lives in a country I've never heard of, and a filmmaker that speaks an entirely different language, actually carry the same viewpoints or sentiments that I have? Why did it speak to me on this level? That's because, again, like the commonality that we have as human beings and the common threads that we have, it's not specific to language or cultural identity or religion or spirituality. Like we all have to recognize we're all part of the same species, it's part of the same community. And if art can indicate that, if it can help those realizations happen, all the power to it.
Yeah.
It's celebrated.
Oh, for sure, man. For sure. God damn it, man. This has been such a great conversation, Jordan. I've
Awesome.
really
Yeah,
enjoyed this.
I appreciate it.
Oh, no worries at all, man. No worries at all. Um, yeah, I realize that I have kept you for a long ass time. So I'm gonna let you go.
No
But
worries.
before I let you go, right? Well, couple of things, right? So going into all of this, this whole journey to bring this film, well, it's not even complete. You're not. You're just at the beginning. You know, you you haven't gone back. Like like Fraudo, you've gone there, but you haven't gone back again.
Right,
You know what I
right.
mean? But coming into this at the start, like, what did you envision would be the toughest challenge? And now you've completed this first chapter. Like, what what turned out to be the toughest part?
The tough The toughest part, in my opinion, I think a lot of independent filmmakers go through this, is it's really acquiring the financing. I mean, now the nature of how most independent films have to be financed, unless you get a
Mm,
benefactor that, says, you know what, I love this story, I'm going to get behind it, I'm going to give you unlimited means and funds. That is a very, very rare instance now. I mean, the streamers, when they originate their original content, usually they're doing it at certain price points, unless, like, I mean, if the inclusion in the project includes celebrated names or filmmakers that have great stature, they've been in the business 30, 40 years, that's a project of a different stratum, right? So
yeah.
I'm just thinking about, a filmmaker that's got, their 5, 6 films in, they're gaining some credence, credibility, and then they're like, I want to make this and I need a budget of 5, 10, 15, $20 million. Like, you're going to have to scrape together a lot of partners to be able to get the dollar amount that will allow you to execute the storytelling in the means that you want. So I knew, number one, the financing was going to be difficult. And now we're really pledging ourselves on that road for the financing for the feature. Getting the financing for the short was also difficult in and of itself. This is going to be on a completely different level. And that's fine. Everyone's got to go through that. The second difficulty is that I'm also, exercising myself as a multi-hyphenate on the project. So I wrote the screenplay. I'm lead acting in one of the lead roles in the film. I'm helping produce in some capacity. I'm sure when the dust settles. So when you're going to wear different hats, you got to make sure the project takes on characteristics that make the person that is providing the financing or the production partners that you have, make them feel comfortable that you've got the other creatives around you that have enough stature where, you know what, we feel comforted enough that the plan that's being implemented is going to be executed right. They're seeing things the right way. They're forecasting, problem solving. They're doing their diligence. And I think that aspect too. I mean, if you look at stories like Stallone, and I mean, he had to sell his dog, which I believe he bought back after the fact. And I mean, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, I read on their story, I really look up to these people. Like, they had to go from house to house because they were going to get evicted because the money's running short, and you got to gain the next role to make the bills get paid. And everyone's got to go through something. So
Mm,
that's fine. And I just embraced that. That's just part of the journey. And you have to be a bit stubborn in a positive way, a bit resilient. But if that's part of it, Kevin, that's part of it. I mean, if you get to make your art, I mean, like all the parts of it that you don't like as well, because those are the parts that also deliver the result that you're aiming for.
mm, true. Very true. And I think there's something about a struggle, right? When you had to work real hard for something, it hits a little different when you've achieved it.
Right.
It's like, yeah, it'd be great if things were handed to you. And, I think you can definitely appreciate those things. But when you really just had to put everything into achieving something, when you've got there, Yeah, I mean, you just turn around and you look at the view and you're just like, damn. You know what I mean? There's something about that.
Yeah, we all go through it, like, it's I think it's Denzel. Somebody said, like, you want it to rain, you got to deal with the mud too. Or one of my favorite quotes is like, the things you think are in the way are the way. I mean, that's part of it. I mean, and also I think it's a half-hearted pursuit too. If you just have things handed to you, like as human beings, if life is easy, it's the metal, it's the toil, that's really what unleashes like the potencies, the power inside of you, and also the
Mm,
growth. You got to make mistakes to grow from. You have to
yeah.
learn and lead from your mistakes, and also not just that, adversity and understanding how to pick yourself up, off the ground. I mean, there's even just in this film process, there are moments that just they gut you, and you got to get yourself off the canvas, and it's okay, you got to move forward. And you know what I find happens, the more that you go through and you hit the low moments, you get conditioned. And then the low moments don't hit you in such a negative way. You pick yourself back up quicker. And that's why, like, there's no greater teacher than experience, right? Because when you go through things, it's going to teach you how to get through it the next time better. And then sometimes it allows you to preempt and then avoid making the mistake the second time. So the path, it just becomes more efficient. But also in that path, you learn a lot about yourself. And I think that's probably the best part of any process. It's all the
Mm,
self discovery we have to go through, right, in life.
yeah. No, most definitely, man. Most definitely. And another thing I wanted to ask you, man, right? So, there's all of these films that you know, hold high. There's people that you look up to.
Mhm.
Now, in making, your work, like how close do you think you are right now to finding your voice?
Wow. What a great question, Kevin. I mean, I think you're always so close and always so far, right? I mean, these are, I mean, Scorsese, Ridley Scott, Spielberg, Peter Jackson, I mean, Michael Mann. Like these are people that I want to consider colleagues one day. I want to work with these people. I mean, a lot of creatives want to work with people of that stature. I don't know, like, I think when you set goals, perhaps, I've always looked at it where you got the long horizon, the North Star, and then you've also got the work that has to happen in between. So you got to set individualized goals on different projects or metrics or quarters or years. And I think you just put your head down, work, and then you got to work with qualitative people. You want to work on projects that you think matter, that people are going to feel something from, and then you're building up a canon, a library of credits and experiences, and the collaborative spirit of giving yourself to others in that creative process. And then you hope that they call you back and you try to lift them up as you're lifting, and then everyone rises together that way, right?
Mm,
So I don't know, like, how close or how far. I just know that I just throw myself in the work. I know how I feel when they yell action. I know what compels me to act and how I feel and what I want to do in this industry. And I know I have things to say. And if that falls upon more ears and eyes, then all the power to it. And if it falls on less, it's never going to stop me from creating. So I don't get tied to outcomes. I get tied to process.
tremendous. I mean, I think a big thing about, film, TV, whatever the project is, right? People want to be able to resonate to it, find empathy in it, right? Find that connective tissue. And, companies want to use trailers and posters and all of these different things. But I think a conversation is such a great tool for people to, what I mean, connect with people, right? To hear the words people say and think, man, that's such a great way of looking at things. The way they talked about that project, I really want to see it.
Right.
And so I think when people hear this, Jordan, man, they're gonna come flooding to check out your work, because the reverence in which you talk about stuff, right? The clear passion, but also that that thirst for education, that thirst for knowledge, and knowing that I don't know everything. So I'm on this journey to find out as much as I can. I think that comes clear in tropes. So, you know what I mean? If people didn't know who you were, they're gonna know now, and they're gonna check out these films, and they're gonna want more of Brothers in Arms. So let the people know how they can follow you, and how they could contribute to getting this thing made.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Kevin. Thank you for the kind words, and you're a gracious host. And I could tell, you've done this many, many times. Appreciate all the support you're providing for filmmakers, for the viewers or listeners. To find out more about the film, www.watchbrothersinarms.com. That will give you updated news on what's happening with the project and our short film to feature film aim. Um, my website, actorjordancharles.com. That's got a lot of clips on prior work and, updated news on what's happening, some biographical material. And then my Instagram handle is probably the best way to kind of follow along with uh, more newsworthy snippets and things like that. That's act, at actor Jordan Charles as well.
Tremendous. People, all the links, all the information will be on the website. So make sure you go through and, go follow Jordan, right? Go check out the film and just support, man, because this is like the next generation coming through, right? When we have all of these people, right? Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, just the list goes on. Michael Mann, you know what I mean? Like, all of these people have been doing their thing for years, and they're reaching the end, unfortunately, right? So they're passing the gauntlet, right, to this next generation of filmmakers, right? Like Marcus Fleming, like Daniel Glenn Barber, like James Samuels, you know what I mean? Just like all of these people, like Jordan Charles, right? So you, by supporting, you're lifting this industry up. You're keeping the lifeblood flowing through, and you're giving like just this new platform for new stories, right? Which is the joy of it all, giving new stories, new life. So that's what this is, people. So go support Jordan, go check out the films, and yeah, just enjoy this creative journey.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Kevin. That's really, really kind. You're right. We're all part of a continuum, man. Viewers are part of the continuum of, filmmaking and watching it and getting something out of it. And artists are part of a continuum for the people that pledged the way before us. And then after us, there's going to be even more emerging. So it's just, we got to treat each other with care, support, and respect. And I appreciate your streaming podcast here to be part of that as well. Thank you for the support.
Hey, no worries at all, man. And yeah, when the next project is ready, please come by, and we will have another epic conversation.
Awesome, Kevin. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Okay.
Hey, you take care of yourself, man.
Same with you.
All right. Bye.